And welcome back to Coaching with the Bible. This week, episode 109, season 2, episode 55, the end of the book of Deuteronomy, the completion for the second time of the 5 books of Moses together. This coming week's portion, not read tomorrow, but read on the holiday next week, Vizot HaBracha. Our title, our topic this week is on closing things out. How do we close? Well, we're celebrating a little bit today. We are celebrating the second round of completing Coaching with the Bible together. Every year, as I have the opportunity to complete studying the 5 books of Moses, it's very meaningful, very powerful for me. All the new ideas that maybe I've picked up, all the new sources that I've had the opportunity to see, all the new ways of thinking about different events and different verses and different comments and different questions and different answers. And there's something in closing it out. There's something in finishing it out. But admittedly, as I finish it out, there is always a tinge of sadness. When we spend so much time with a work, we spend so much time with a person, like the person known as Moses, so we have an affinity, we have a connection, we have call it a relationship that exists there, that when the person passes on, it's a little bit sad. The notion that we're not going to see Moses again for a good stretch of time, until we reach the book of Exodus again, is a little bit sad. It's exciting to know that we're going to reconnect with Adam and Eve and Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Sarah and Rebecca, Rachel and Leah and Joseph and the brothers and all those other people, all those incredible characters. But there is a tinge of sadness, and there should be to some degree, when Moses passes away. My interest, particularly today, was thinking about how to close out the second year of Coaching with the Bible. And so first, as we did last year, and as I try to do often, a moment of gratitude and appreciation of thanks to God first for the opportunity to study this work and the opportunity to produce this content on a week in and week out basis, to my wife and children for putting up with me on a week in, week out basis as I try to work it through in my own mind, and as I try to think through different ideas as they come each and every week. I thank you and I appreciate you and I love you all. To my friends and wider family and network and colleagues and people around me who are participants, really not just listeners, but participants in this process over the course of weeks and months and years now, I thank you really for staying with me, for joining me somewhere in the middle, for listening back and for commenting and for sharing your wisdom and your insights and your questions, whether that's in a WhatsApp message or an email or a voice note, Facebook message, wherever it comes. I appreciate it. I learn from you all. I grow from you all. And this is in itself a work in progress, like we are all a work in progress. And as we spend each week together trying to grow and develop as people. And so closing out a second year is thrilling on some level, really exciting, a little bit sad because all those ideas that we've sort of worked on, we've sort of now put to bed a little bit, but very much looking forward to the opportunity to try and do it again, albeit, as always, try and do it differently than we did it the last time. So a moment of gratitude and appreciation. Thank you for this opportunity, and looking forward to the next one as we come to it starting next week. But how do we close things out? I wonder if you think about the second for just a moment, if we stay inside the Bible for just a longer minute here. If you were writing the end of the 5 books of Moses, how would you have written the close? What would you expect from it? You'd want it to be strong. You'd want it to be powerful. You'd want it to be meaningful. Perhaps you'd want it to be epic. In the land of a fairy tale ending, one might have expected that right at the end, God would change God's mind and allow Moses to enter the land at his request, as was his request over the course of many, many days and weeks and months and prayers. But it's not to be. Moses does not cross. Moses sees the land, but Moses does not cross into the land. He never steps foot in the land. For me, there's something in that, because where I'm recording, I'm in the land of Israel now as we're recording this, and so there's something very powerful for me as I think about that idea. Sort of on some level, how easy it has been for me to come here, to visit here, to now live here. It's not easy to live here, but in the sense that have that opportunity to do that, whereas Moses did not, is not lost on me. And so that sort of fairy tale, happy, version of the story doesn't come to pass. So that's not the ending. The ending is the passing of Moses. When we think about closing it out, Moses closing out his work, imagine we all do think that Moses was a success. The great leaders in the history of the world. Greatest leader the people of Israel had ever had. His great act was to bring the people, at least we thought, into the land. His final act is getting them to the edge of the land, putting them in position to go into the land, with the opportunity then in the hands of his student, his disciple, Joshua, to inherit the land, to settle the land, to grow the land, to build the covenantal society that we've talked about so many times, using the words of Rabbi Sachs. And so there's a lot of that. Moses doesn't finish that task of bringing the people into the land. It appears, though, and we would all agree, that he is certainly a great success. And he goes out strong. The Bible is very clear that he goes out strong. He is not weakened. He is not diminished, the Bible says. His eyes have not weakened, the Bible tells us. He is, in theory, able to go on longer. However, that is not God's plan. And so when we think about closing, the first thing we should think about is the reality that we don't always get to write the ending the way we want. We know this from athletes and actors and politicians, that they don't necessarily get to write the ending of the story the way in which they want, the manner in which they want, the details, how they want it to go. They just don't. We don't always get to write the ending of the story. We don't always get to write an epic close to our stories. And we don't always get to finish the work that we've started. When you think about all the people that go into the 5 books of Moses, that get ultimately to the point where the people are standing at the edge of the river Jordan to enter into the land, it was promised all the way back to Abraham. But he didn't see it happen, and Isaac didn't see it, and Jacob didn't see it, and Joseph, and none of the others actually got to see the promise fulfilled. They did their part. As the ethics of the fathers tells us, it is not upon us to complete the work, but we are not permitted to not participate in the work in the first place. We do our part. How it ends is not always in our control. We have to be okay with that. We have to be accepting of that reality, that we are responsible to do our part, we're responsible to fulfill our role, and that we also have to appreciate that we can't always finish it out the way we want. But it's interesting when we think about closers and closing and how people close. In real estate terms, I'll talk about a person who is a great closer in real estate. He gets the contract signed. He makes the sale. I'll talk about a sales closer. That's the person, you bring them into a call, you bring them into a meeting, they get the deal done. They're a great closer. In fundraising, you have the same. It's the person who doesn't just get the meetings, that's nice, but the person who closes out the ask. They get the donor to make the donation at or hopefully above the level that they perhaps were considering or expecting to when they went in. They were great at that. There was a certain skill set to that. In sports, they'll talk about in baseball, a great closer, someone who finishes the game out well. There's an idea in statistics in baseball particularly about close and late. People who are great performers when everything is on the line at the end, when it's tight and it's close and it's stressful and it's anxiety-ridden, it's all those things. Do people close? Can we rely and trust on the person to finish the job, right? To finish the job, get it done when it needs to be gotten done. A closer. And so the question then becomes, is how do we close? What do we do to make it happen? I know that in my work, I've talked a lot about, in fundraising, getting off to a great start. Starting is important. Optimizing for the start, not just optimizing for the finish, but optimizing for the start. But there's no question that we also have to optimize for the close, for the finish. We don't want to leave it out there for chance. How do we do that? How do we establish closing it out? How do we get to a point in a place where we can close out on something that's really important and finish it out? And appreciate that finishing is important. And the finishing doesn't always mean finishing it at the level or at the height at which you want. Sometimes it's just finishing. So you'll see marathoners, runners, riders who are in a race who finish anyway, even if they're not going to quote unquote win. They're not going to finish first or second. They're not going to be on the podium. They're not going to medal. There's something in finishing. There's something in completing the task, even if it's not at the highest level. Here's another rule of it. Many years ago, I never forgot this, played hockey in high school, or as my Canadian friends would laugh if I said it was hockey. It was ball hockey on the floor with my feet. I didn't skate. I didn't ice skate. I didn't roller skate. But I remember in 12th grade, in our senior year, we were playing in the championship, and by the time the third period rolled around, we were getting blown out. There was no chance we were going to win. Unfortunate, but it's true. I don't think it pains me so much anymore, but this is the point. Before we went out for the third period, one of my teammates, also in the 12th grade, a senior graduating, this is going to be his last game, looked at me and said, let's make this the most epic third period ever. Let's close it out the right way. It stuck with me all these years later. This is like 29 years ago. It stuck with me. There's a certain integrity. There's a certain character that goes into being someone who closes out those situations, even if it's not to the result that you want. So the first thing with respect to closing is you don't always get to close it how you want. You don't always get to write the end of the story the way you want. Number two is that there's a certain integrity, there's a certain quality of person who always finishes the job, even if on occasion finishing the job isn't being finished the way that they want. It's an important piece to the puzzle. You finished. Go and finish. Finish it out. Finish the test. Finish the task. Finish the project. Don't let it sort of fester or roll or not have a close. It needs to have a finish. It needs to end. And so we have to sort of think about those kinds of things. We have to think about how we want to do that. But to be great at it, to really be great at closing, we have to go into it with a certain approach. There's a mindset about closing things out, certainly closing them out the way you want them to close. How do you do that? How do you build that? The reality of it is that, again, like a lot of things, this is a learned skill. One can become a great closer, a great finisher, someone who everyone can rely on to get the job done. We can overcome our tendencies, our proclivities, our, let's call them weaknesses for not getting it done. For the procrastinators among us, like myself, who didn't always get things done, don't always finish everything out. Coaching with the Bible, there are essays based on the pieces that I've presented here with you that I've started to write that are not finished. I haven't closed them out. There's sort of like ideas around it that I have not yet developed. I haven't closed on them. I haven't gotten to that point. There's a certain, as I said, there's a certain skill in being able to close out everything that you do. There's a certain, the term that they use in some of the articles and some of the books, there's a certain moxie, there's a certain sort of, I don't even know what the term might actually be for it. It's a certain mix of courage and guts, and belief perhaps that I can always get this done. I can always make the effort. I can always get to where I need to get to. But it's a learned skill set. The first thing that comes to it, part of this comes from a great article I read by a gentleman named Grant Cardone, who is, I'm pretty sure, a real estate guy, but I think before that was in sales in particular. Anyway, he talks a lot about the idea that first and foremost is a sort of a commitment to the greatness, a commitment to the close. That whatever it's going to take, I'm obsessed with the idea of getting to the close. So part of that's the mindset piece. I'm not going to take less than finishing this out. That's one. Two, I think this is part of the learned part of this that you can learn from others, very importantly, people who've done this before you, is to establish a set of either criteria, or you want to call it templates, you want to call them strategies that you can use at different times to get to the finish line with a deal, with a negotiation, with a customer, with whatever, with yourself to get you there. Because sometimes you don't want to get there. That's why the strategy or the process is important, because sometimes you'll convince yourself that you don't actually want to be there, but you know you need to be there. And so you need that 1 or 2 or 3 ways that gets you over the hump every time, regardless of what you're telling yourself or what your inner talk, your self-talk is actually going on. So getting a couple of those strategies, learning from people who've done it well for an extended period of time that you relate to, connect to see the close for them, and then effectively steal that strategy from them. Use the strategies that they're using to get you to the end. I think those are really, really important. I think the other part of it is if it's a sales matter or it's a negotiation matter, I think one's ability to really see what the issues are for somebody else that's holding them back, which we talked about before, really getting to the core of the mindset of what the procrastination or the imposterish feeling is, or whatever it is that scares them, that holds people back, getting to understanding that and being able to uncover that and to uproot it potentially, or to avoid it, to go around it, or to go through it, makes for very powerful closers. There's always a reason why not to do something. The closer is the one who accepts that that reason might be valid and still does whatever it is they can to produce and to complete and to finish out what it is that they're trying to do. So these are really how you do this. It's like, and then spending the time on that, looking at your process, establishing what works for you and what doesn't work for you, committing to finishing. Committing to finishing is really important. Developing the strategies that work for you, 1 or 2 or 3 ways, and then going after it and really getting it done. I know that in fundraising, it was certainly something that I learned over time. One of the things I learned that in closing out a good ask was actually shutting up and not saying anything after making the ask, not continuing to talk, allowing for some of that silence to sit there. I learned also that in closing out a really good ask was creating that sense of urgency, that sense of what you'll call FOMO, fear of missing out, that opportunity might not be there for that donor, that philanthropist, that person, that potential partner, come a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks from now. It is a line there between them feeling like, well, they could just go to somebody else. Why don't they just go to somebody else? And, oh no, they might go to somebody else and it won't be me who gets the opportunity to have that specific impact when I want that impact. So creating that urgency, creating that FOMO, creating that silence, that discomfort in that silence where it stews, and not saying the extra word that gets you to the close. There's a persistence to it as well. I know from watching and reading about sales and from salespeople, how they go back to people, how they follow up with people, how they come back to somebody who might have said no to them in the past, how they check in with someone who is on the fence on this kind of a thing on a consistent and regular basis, to the point of it being a nuisance, but not being really bothersome. So they're sort of scratching at that and get the person ultimately to sign, to close, and to get that deal done. These are the things that really work. This is how we close. And so when the Bible closes out on the 5 books of Moses, as much as there's discomfort there to some degree, and that sort of sadness there to some degree, you can appreciate, obviously we know that there's the rest of the Bible that's to come, to learn, to study. There's the next chapter in the story of the people. There's also this great opportunity to come back to it and to be with it again as it starts again the next time. There's that challenge about doing it again. That's the part of I think the joy for some people that I've spoken to who are great closers is they want to close this one because they're excited about the next one also. And so there's something to that as well. And for me, that's a great comfort in that sense about closing. As much as I want to close and I want to finish, one wants to finish out a project, one wants to finish out a program, wants to finish a negotiation, finish out an ask, and do it in the best way possible to the greatest level of success. Sometimes when we finish, because we've talked a lot about process over time, when we're finished, there's a sadness to that finish. But perhaps we can uplift that sadness with the following quote, which I saw from Picasso, the great famous painter. He said, when asked about finishing a work, to finish a work, to finish a picture, what nonsense. To finish it means to be through with it, to kill it, to rid it of its soul, to give it its final blow, the coup de grace for the painter as well as for the picture. Basically means you never finish. It's a long journey. It's a long process. You start, but you don't necessarily finish. And that's how I feel about the Bible. For me, that's how I feel about a lot of the projects and the programs and the people that I meet along the way. We never finish. This part or this chapter is completed, but the next chapter is yet to be written. And there's an excitement, there's a thrill in the adventure that is to come with the next one along the way. That is Coaching with the Bible for this week. I look forward to seeing you next week as we begin again the 5 books of Moses.